All right, we should be recording now. Let's see. So this is kind of like my second or third time using the webinar. So there is a Q&A and a chat box, but I think you guys only have permission to do the Q&A. But can everyone see my screen? I'll let anyone talk or, yep, okay. They raise their hand, maybe, or just put something in the question. Yep, yep, okay. Okay, excellent. Cool. Thank you. Okay, so with that said, looks like everyone can see my screen. So we'll go ahead and get started. Well, everyone, I want to thank you for joining us today. I will tell you, this session or this feature, I should say, has gotten me and a couple of my colleagues really excited. It is a beta feature. This is the first time we've done a session on a beta feature. But it's really exciting to see where product is going, and especially trying to help us, their developers that work with the product to be able to help aggregate data or make integrations easier. So with that said, we'll go ahead and get started. We will have plenty of time at the end of the session to answer questions. Now, I'll tell you, I don't know if I'll be able to answer all your questions on this because of the nature of this feature. But I will definitely, I want to know your questions because product and the product manager specifically is very interested on the feedback that I received from this session. And to even know, like, maybe as we're walking through it, what type of use cases you can kind of envision their organization maybe using something like this with. So we'll get more into that later as we go. So our objective today is to understand how external data can be piped into Liferay in real time, and the power of collection providers that they provide us without having to plumb in all the logic, because they can take a while sometimes. This is a little bit about the session breakdown. We're going to kind of look at some concepts and some context for setting the stage of what why this type of integration of this feature is so exciting. We're going to look at using an external data source. I'm using a language called Ballerina. It is Java-like, but it makes sense. We're not going to spend a lot of time in it, but I'm going to just show you real quickly. It's a way I could quickly do a external service, but you can write it in anything. We're going to look at bridging the gap, how we get data from this external provider into Liferay, and we're going to look at connecting it, and then we're also going to look at the UI aspect of it, because what the benefit is we actually get to use Liferay out of the box features to help visualize this data that we're bringing in. This is the toolkit that I'm using. It is a little bit different. You can see I'm using 101. Actually, I think I'm using 93 on this, but you have to have at least 92 or 93, I think it is, to play with this feature. It's hidden behind a feature flag. We'll look at that. And then I am using Ballerina, the latest release of it. And I'm also using VS Code because it has a nice, Ballerina is a nice plugin for VS Code. So with that said, this is basically the challenge that all portals are meant to solve, is the aggregation of data, or function into a single kind of pane of glass. We want to present a unified view. Let me back up one. Thought I had my laser pointer. Yep. Okay. We want our users to do kind of a one-stop shopping, and a lot of the solutions that a lot of organizations have built, they present this. That's kind of the benefit. Aggregating data across the organization or the enterprise and presenting it to users, whether it's in whatever the domain is, e-commerce, marketing, or manufacturing, finance, citizen self-service portal. It's kind of just a common pattern. But no one organization is using one system to perform all their business functions. That's kind of a unicorn notion. What we all in reality have is all these disparate systems, all over the organization. Some of them are legacy, some of them are new systems, and we're always trying to pull this data in. They've all got different structures. There's different standards. Some will be calling SOAP still, some are REST. It's just the technology stacks can be very different according to all of that. And the way we would solve this, maybe it was with like an ETL job sometimes, or we would currently in like, a lot of times in Liferay, you write like a microservice or even ESB. Maybe you have, a backend system, and then you have a front end, or a backend module maybe, or then a front end like Liferay MVC portlet that is presenting the data within Liferay. But it's just a lot for us to kind of work through. And it would be great if we had just a nicer way to allow our data to flow, from the external systems and consume it into Liferay. And then maybe there's some that we sync, maybe with an ETL or something, we sync it inside of, the current, schema. But we would like to, have our data, where we can absorb it easier. And then more importantly, we'd like to be able to use something that's like, wouldn't it be nice if our content admins, once the data is registered or made available in Liferay, that then our content admins could then real quickly, modify the UI or manipulate it or present it in whatever manner that they would like. So, collection providers. Well, wait a minute. Didn't we already do a session on this back early in the summer? We did. If you don't remember, I think we probably did maybe 2 or 3 of them on collection providers. And the collection provider can be used. We could create the customization and use that framework to present the data. But if you attended that session, you'll recall, or one of them or both of them, it's a lot of plumbing that we have to do. Most of it is fairly boilerplate, but there's still a lot of moving parts that we kind of have to think through. And the problem with boilerplate is it can be error prone, because it's the repetitive nature of the task. So yes, you can use a collection provider to kind of do what we would love to accomplish to make the data flow more easily, but it still requires a lot, like kind of on that backend service, or even just the customization to create the info provider for the UI. Is there any alternatives? Well, yes, that's kind of what brings us here today and what we're kind of excited about. It's called Proxy Objects. Proxy Objects allows us to achieve the same outcome without all the code. There is still code that we have to have, but it's just a lot less than what we would typically have to do in the past. It's a little less restrictive, of course, and it'll follow like an 80-20 rule, and it will be a viable solution in most use cases. But like I said, this is still beta, so we really want your feedback, to be able to take that to product, because product is heavily investing in this feature. So we'll mention, I'll discuss more about that later, how you can kind of reach out and share your feedback. So let's get to the good part. Let's get to the demo. Okay, so what I've got right here is a Liferay instance that is up and running. This is on, like I said, 93. I have my workspace right here. This is basically you can see I'm using a update 93. There's nothing really done to it. It's just plain vanilla. So something you should immediately be able to go look at. So with that said, there's a couple of things. What we're going to do is look at what we're going to kind of our players that kind of we're going to work with today. I needed an easy API that I could kind of access that was for free. So I looked at the iTunes API that Apple provides. It's pretty self-explanatory. The documentation is fairly clear. And so we're going to kind of make use of that. And that's going to be our data pipe, or the place we're going to get our data. So just to kind of show you an example of what that looks like, let's just kind of do a curl real quickly. I'm actually going to, let me see if I got a terminal window. Where'd my terminal window go? And I'm going to bring that over here into this other stream so we can all use it. Some things I don't like to use the terminal in my IntelliJ 4. I'd rather just have a separate terminal working. So you can see I'm just going to curl the API. I'm going to pipe it through JQ. Doing a search term university, podcasts. We're just going to look for that. And, you know, I'm going to limit it to 25. And of course, I'm going to mark explicit no. And, you know, you can see, okay, so that's the API we're going to make use of. We want to, you know, pull that data in, and we'd like to render it obviously in Liferay. Okay. So this is where Ballerina is going to come in. Now, Ballerina, there's nothing extremely special about this language other than the fact that a colleague of mine showed me this language and said, hey, he tried this same type of integration using Spring Boot, and it was just a lot. It took a lot more to kind of, you know, he was writing. And so he looked at Ballerina, and he could write the kind of basically the same level of code a lot quicker, and it was actually, he thought it was actually more intuitive. The language was created by WSO2. You know, they're an open source middleware company which provides a suite of software for application development and you know, some other cloud solutions, IAM technologies. But it's fairly easy to kind of look at in the syntax. So with that, we're going to go back over to my workspace, and I'm going to go into kind of some of the features as we look at the code. But the first thing I want to do is I'm going to go ahead and let's pull up the code and show you what we're going to do. Look at it first, and we'll talk through it. So the first thing I'm going to do is in my Liferay workspace is, now this could be a service that is somewhere else that's running, but let's kind of just pretend like maybe this is something in a cloud environment, or maybe like LXC self-managed, where it's a container that's going to get spun up along with, you know, our Liferay you know, service in LXC. But you could very much, like if you have this in your own Kubernetes environment, you maybe have you know, another container that it spins up. That's actually one of the nice things about Ballerina, is it automatically supports Docker and Kubernetes in the generation of all the manifest files immediately. We're not going to look at that today, but maybe in another session. But it, you know, Ballerina is not really the topic or the focal point of this. It's just really the means to get our data. So with that said, the first thing I'm going to do is in my Liferay workspace is I'm going to go ahead and type, create a client extensions directory. Okay. So client extensions is a new extension model that Liferay offers in 7.4 to be able to do customizations. I'm going to talk about that a little bit more in a minute, but I can't type and talk at the same time. So I'm going to wait, and then the next thing we're going to do is I'm going to go ahead and create a new Ballerina project, Bal new EDU podcasts. This is nothing special. And then I'm going to go ahead and open that up in, actually, I need to change directory first into that. All right. And that should launch VS Code for me in this other window that you can't see. So let me bring this over. Okay. Close these windows down. And all we've done is create a Ballerina project, and it has created for me a main file. So that main Ballerina file. So I'm going to go ahead and paste the code in here because that's really what we're looking at. And then we'll start talking through a little bit of the features of this language. And as we talk through like the code, to just kind of get it all in our mind. Okay. So one of the things about Ballerina is just some key points to make you aware of. Is it's really easy to use. The syntax is fairly intuitive, and it's cloud native. So network primitives are built in, like I mentioned already. It's got support for Docker and Kubernetes, and creating all the manifests for you for a service that you would write. I mean, basically, it is a language that's designed specifically for network integrations, which is why I'm using it in this case, kind of to pull this back end data in from, you know, iTunes and be able for me to present it into Liferay. And it's also portable. But like I said, you can easily do this in Spring Boot. That's not a problem. So a couple things to check out is that it supports like JSON or XML natively. There's not really like a lot of plugins or anything that you have to do, or extra libraries you have to include. And you get that kind of for free. It's also kind of succinct. So what we have here is I've got basically two services. One's listing on 9093 port, and this is going to be the one that's actually going to call the iTunes API. And you can see I've got basically the first endpoint is basically for kind of the get all basically of all the podcasts, and it passes in an object definition, which we're going to look at in a minute. Basically, that's just a reference code or a key on the Liferay side. It's going to pass in the page and the page size, and then it's going to return, a Liferay response entity, which we've defined our Liferay response entity right here is a Liferay iTunes search item. It's an array of those items, and then it's going to return a total record count. And then you can see easily what that Liferay iTunes search item record looks like right here. And the JSON mapping is going to be like really easy. I don't have to do a lot of the annotations, like maybe in Java, to make the mapping work easily for me. It's just, we'll look at that in a minute. Like I said, it's really nice. But the main thing is I'm quickly spinning up a service. I'm going to use this client, HTTP client, to call the iTunes API. It's going to look for science podcasts. It is going to pass the page size and page parameters, and then it's going to return the result set back. It's going to do a conversion because it's going to actually convert from the Liferay iTunes search result or the iTunes search results, those records, to Liferay records. And the only difference between these two, if you notice, is basically the external reference code versus like the collection ID. There may be a way that I can map that easier, but I just did two. I've just got two record types here, and then I mapped them. But they're basically, everything else is really the same. The JSON key, the key will be whatever that actual variable name is. The second request that we have here is for the get podcast is just for the singular lookup. Okay, so if I want to just get the one reference to the one record, and I want to look up just say that one podcast and get information on it, that's what this call is for right here. And you can see it's basically passing in that an external reference code, which is coming from the Liferay side. I'm also, because there is I want to be able to proxy or cache some of this, or basically really cache some of this data that's pulling back from iTunes. So my requests are a lot, the response for on the Liferay side is faster. I'm actually kind of setting up another service, and then I'm caching those calls and the data that pulls back from the iTunes service. So that's what you have here is this proxy client is basically what we're really going to ultimately hit from the Liferay side, and then it's going to make the call if it needs to the to iTunes. This is kind of the conversion logic. You can see the return is really easy. It's going to return a JSON format, just like I've kind of declared it right here. You can see the mapping from the iTunes search item right here, item artwork URL 100, how that easily maps over to what the Liferay iTunes search item is. Very simple, easy to read. That's for converting one item. This one is converting for multiple items when we pull back, the listing like we did in the curl command a minute ago. And I'm just pulling out also the values that I want. So you can see right here, like here's an artwork URL 600. There is artwork URL 100. And you can see the artist name, the collection name, and you can see that's the values that's going to be pulled when Ballerina makes that call to iTunes, and then we're just going to map those over to the Liferay version of that record, and then we're just going to return the result. These are just our quick little methods that we have for doing our search, and that's really about it in doing the lookup. So that's honestly about it. As far as walking through the Ballerina code, it's not a lot here. And like I said, that's not really the focus, of this, but I'm using this to get this thing quickly stood up the idea here that you can picture is in your organization, you maybe have another business or another group that maybe already provides a REST endpoint or some REST services. What they would have to do is maybe they support the API calls that Liferay for the proxy objects, but they've already got the data. And so the maintenance of that is kind of, within this other other line of business that you maybe have, or maybe if it's in your group, you just have to maintain that. But then for the UI portion, we're going to basically do all that with out of the box Liferay. So like I said, typically you could have this run on another environment or can spin up another container in your landscape or in your environment. But for here, obviously, I'm just going to run this locally. So with that said, let's go ahead and just get this guy started. I'm going to kick off a terminal, and we're going to go ahead and start this service. So I'm going to say val run real quickly. So what I have right here, just if it's not, oh, I need to hit save. It's doing the hell of it. Let's try this now. There we go. Okay. And now let's check and make sure that maybe our service is running and that it is hitting the iTunes API. So I'm curling that service on 9093. I'm passing it in just and what would be an object key. A lot of this is kind of just pass through to meet the contract. And there we go. So this is calling the Ballerina service, which is returning back that data from, it's calling iTunes and then returning back the just basically the record fields that we want. So that's perfect. That's really what we want right at this point. So I know you're thinking, oh wait, again, did I join the wrong seminar or the wrong session? Because I thought this was supposed to be something with Liferay. Well, it is. We're about to go look at that next. Okay. So I'm going to move this off my screen for a second. We're going to pull with the Liferay. We're going to go ahead and log in. And I'm going to hit sign in. Test. Really secure. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go to Control Panel and go to Instance Settings. And I'm going to go to Feature Flags. So like I said, or if you probably already know, one of the benefits of the Liferay 7.4 release model is that not only do you get, bug fixes and enhancements, or excuse me, bug fixes and security fixes, but you also get enhancements that are, released to you during the quarterly updates. And all these features are rated or ranked or have a different status according to product and their readiness. And so they're, you can see some of them are beta, some of them are developer, some of them will be release, and you can enable them or disable them. I mean, they basically come, opt out by default, and you have to enable them if you'd like to use them. But the one we're looking at today is Proxy Objects. So I can go ahead and hit enable here. And you'll see it gives you the LPS that you could reference where this feature was requested. And then you can see a little bit of a description. Some of these, like developer, it's only going to list, this is not really meant for customers to some degree, basically, like it doesn't even give the descriptions. But the beta is. So now you can enable these beta flags or feature flags two different ways. You can enable them, through the UI, like I'm doing here, or you could also do them in your portal.ext. So if I was going to do this in the portal.ext settings or properties file, then what I would do is pull up to my portal properties. I would mention feature and then feature.flag what the LPS is equals true. And you can see, that's 135.430, and this is 135.430. But the problem here is on this one, I would have to, restart my server, and I've already got my server up and running. So in this case, I'm going to just enable it through the UI. But either way, you can do that. So those are the two things. So once I've added that, now we've got this new feature that we can start making use of. So let's go ahead, and that's actually is already in. I don't even have it saved on this. So let's go now, see what this is going to do, and we're going to create the bridge to get this information, say from iTunes, and get it over into Liferay real easily. So we've already told you a couple of times. I said, by the name, I kind of gave you a spoiler that this is a new feature, but I mentioned objects. So it is going to use the objects framework, or the objects feature that's within Liferay 7.4 that was released. It is a relatively new feature, but it has been out, and a lot of customers are making use of it. And it's a really nice feature that really can save you a lot of time over using the traditional just service builder. Let me do one thing real quickly, because I had restarted this session or this instance beforehand. Let me just kick off this index real fast. This will take a second, because this one doesn't really have much in it. And while it's doing that, I'm going to go ahead and go back to objects. It really won't affect anything. It's just that I noticed that not all of it shouldn't. I noticed that some of the other out-of-the-box tables that are available aren't, showing up right now. It should show up in a second when it gets finished. But we'll go ahead and see if we can keep going. So objects you can think of as, it's going to be the bridge, basically, for us to be able to get the information from iTunes. Once I have turned on that feature, I now have a new field right here called storage type. And the default would indicate that any entity that I model with objects is going to be stored in the local Liferay schema. There is, however, a new option now you see with Salesforce when I created that, enabled that feature flag, but we're not using that because right now our data is going to be like in Ballerina or iTunes. Okay, so what we need to do is go do something else real quickly. Like I said, we're going to use a client extension. Client extensions you're probably not familiar with, or maybe you are, maybe you've used like the front end client extensions. Possibly those are you can enable through the UI for like global JavaScript or global CSS, or even the remote client extensions where you can say register a React application into Liferay and have it work within Liferay, but yet run externally outside. So unfortunately, right now, with the other category, or most of the categories of client extensions that we have, being a microservice client extension, like what this is, there's not really any nice interface, and the documentation is kind of not existent yet on it. Because, like I said, we're working kind of like on the knife's edge here, right here, right now. So kind of the tooling normally comes up, follows later on. But for the moment, the easiest way to create a client extension is to use a sample workspace and just make a copy of it and refactor it, or just use it for a reference. So, and if anyone on the call has ever used REST Builder in the really early days, you'll remember that there was some grunt work required for it. So what I've done right here is I've pulled open just the Liferay core source on Git, and went to the Liferay workspaces and the sample workspace client extensions. And there's already one out here called sample etc Spring Boot. Okay, Spring Boot is just a reference because it's just an example of this kind of type plugin or client extension that we're going to use. It really doesn't matter. The point is these other files that it provides that we've got to add to our project so that we can now deploy this or configure Liferay to know where to hit the Ballerina service, because we can't do this within the UI. We have to do a deployment. So the first thing we're going to do is actually, I'm going to go back to, and sorry for flipping around. This is the first time I've ran through this session. Is the settings.grail. Make sure you're on a newer one. I'd say always you probably use the latest, but you need to have something that's at least like 6.1.13, because the reference workspace that's what it has. If we come over here to the settings Gradle that's within the workspace, it has 6.1.13. Anything that's with the new tooling in these client extensions, that's going to be enabled via this the Gradle Liferay Gradle's plugins. So make sure you at least have that. I'm using a newer one, like I said, it's a 7.0, but just make sure you update that. So if you're using this like in your existing like local dev, do that first, because when we go run the deployment in a minute, it'll not work. So with that, let's go back to client extensions, and then we'll go to the Spring Boot. Okay, so I keep going to the right. I've already got this set, so this is really fine. That's all I really needed to do to make sure there. So the next thing I'm going to do is we need to create basically there's a manifest file that's for the extension. So I'm actually going to go to let me see. I've done this 2 different ways. I'm actually going to do this. I've got this where I played with this in another project, and for sake of simplicity, I'm just going to copy it from my other project, but then I'm going to pull it up and show it to you. So if you notice, the EDU podcasts is actually supposed to be in the client extensions folder. Why is that not there? Oh, I may have to, because I probably didn't create it there. We'll move it in a minute. That's fine. It doesn't matter here. I'm going to go and paste this file in here. Okay. I'll move this to, let me go ahead and move this within here. Okay. Sorry, guys. So client extensions, EDU podcast, yes, okay. And then I have this client extensions.yaml. Okay, so what are we looking at here? What this is this is basically a backend or microservice extension that we've got to deploy, and this is basically a descriptor file. Okay, and one is going to be basically an object entry manager. That's what this one is right here, and this is going to register basically, hey, here's a new external endpoint. So we've got that when we go to objects in a minute and we try to create a model, a new one, you know, we have right now default, which would be local Liferay schema. We've got one for Salesforce, because you can also, this proxy objects feature enables you to be able to proxy anything in and out of Salesforce. And you can also, it'll have our new one for our iTunes EDU podcasts, okay? Additionally, what it does is it defines, this is just for registering the microservice, but then we also have one up here that's for, it's an OAuth, application user agent, that works along with this object entry manager. And what this one does is it does 2 things, the OAuth one. It is going to register the Liferay headless API services that the microservice can use. For example, the scopes are set right here to allow for everything for the workflow. If we wanted to allow this external microservice to be able to call back into the headless and trigger anything from the workflow. So it sets up that authorization there. And it also defines the connection address for the service where this podcast endpoint can be found. So that's why this file is important. The other files that I'm going to copy from over here, because I've already got an example of it, is there's a build.gradle. Copy this, and I'll explain it in just a minute. Let me go ahead and pull the Docker file and the LCP JSON. And then I'll also show you within the, we'll refer back to that Spring Boot is just the example so that you see that. I'm just going to pull these up for right now. Okay, so right here. So the Docker file, this is really the one I'm going to show you in a minute that I copy. It's really the same. There's no difference in that. Okay. It's just a standard boilerplate, because what this is really, like I said, even if you've got this, if you have the service running externally somewhere else, and you're managing the spinning up of that other service, then you would just need that client extension for the Liferay workspace. Would just need to have these. Really, I think it still would need the 4 files, even though the Docker really wouldn't be applied, and the build.gradle. In that case, you really are making use of the client, client extension YAML. But because, like I said, the documentation is really non-existent right now, I'm going to say that you need all 4 of these, but it might be something that you really only need 1 of these. The LCP JSON is when you're deploying, it's a deployment descriptor basically for when you're deploying to the Liferay cloud environment. So it just kind of defines that, hey, it's a deployment manifest or deployment type and how much memory and what to scale that service to. Because the idea is, again, this would work if you were, it can work within if you're on-prem, but it could also, like for the LCP, it's meant to work if you're deploying to the Liferay cloud environment. So anyway, those 4 files are really required. Let's go back to the workspace and I'll just show you these. So the build.gradle, in this case, since we're not using, it is a little bit different than what the Spring Boot has because I'm compiling a Ballerina program instead of a Java program. So this is just really the only modification for that. The Docker file, you can see that's really just what it was. You know, on the other one, there's really not any difference. The client extension one, if you actually go back and look at this client extension YAML for the Spring Boot, they've got many other types. You know, they've even got, there's an object action, a couple of object actions that are registered. There's a workflow action. So you kind of see some of the other microservice types that you could register, you know, or types of client extensions. So with that said, this is really all we need, and they're within our project. So we're going to go ahead and just deploy this to Liferay, to our local instance that we've got running. So the way we're going to do this is the same way we would deploy any other application or a customization to Liferay. And we're just going to go run a Blade GW deploy. So I'm in my EDU podcast. I'm going to do Blade GW deploy. This will take it a second. Okay, so that was successful. We're going to come over here and check our logs. You can see my reindex finished. And we see right here, we've got started EDU podcasts, and we see also these lines about OAuth. You'll see the first time you'll see this the first time it's deployed because it's going to create the necessary configurations that allow the remote application, the Ballerina service, to talk to Liferay and back. So you can see that right there. Okay. So now let's go look at our control panel. So we'll go back over here. Refresh this. Yep, there's those other ones. And then the first thing we're going to do is I'm going to model this. So now I've got this new type called Ballerina iTunes EDU. Okay, so we're going to go ahead. We've now got our Ballerina service running because we tested that. We've got our client extension deployed. So now we just need to model it within objects. Okay. Basically, this is telling Liferay, registering, hey, what fields are you going to pull or are you expecting from this external service? Okay. So we're going to go ahead and type in, we're going to name this EDU podcast, and then I'm going to give it a plural name right here. And then, like I said, we're going to leave this storage type right here. And hit save. Now, it will still create a table in the Liferay schema. However, this table will be empty and will stay empty. I tried this a few minutes ago, but I kind of fumbled through work because I'm using the local HSQL embedded database and getting I kind of don't do it all the time. Normally I use MySQL, but I've got another instance where I've created this, and so you can see like it's empty. But the point is, like, the data is never going to reside within the Liferay schema. It's always going to be pulled from our microservice. But the rest of this is pretty much the same thing we always have with our settings with objects. We need to go model our fields. Like I said, we got to tell it, hey, which fields are we gonna expect? So first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna get that artist name. We've got field name, artist name. This is just going to be a text. I'm going to save, and then we're going to get the collection name. We'll copy and paste this easier from another screen than you guys watch me type it. It also allows me to type to let's see. Do the artwork bureau. Let's see. Yep, and this one I'm going to do, because URLs can be long, I'm just going to choose long text. And then I'm going to do the release date. So all we are is registering within Liferay the names of those fields that the JSON service is coming back with. Again, that was what we had. Right here, basically. These are the same names that I'm using, basically. And then the copyright. And this is just going to be text also. Hit save. So great. So we've got our fields defined, and that's really all I need to do. I am going to come back and also you'll notice that you cannot change the storage type. Once you have it's disabled. So I don't know if that's something they would allow later, but that's really basically it. If you had to change the endpoint, I think you can do that through the OAuth configuration. Like say if it changed ports. If not, it might end up requiring a redeployment. But I think I was able to test that earlier, and you just have to. I'll show you that. We'll look at the OAuth in just a minute. I'll show you where that's at. But let's see. The only thing I want to do is move. We want the admin UI here, so I'm going to put this in applications content. And I'm going to save. And then publish. Okay. So the first thing the first time you try this out, I would suggest that you do what I've done here. You just keep it simple and leave those fields when you're doing defining your fields, leave them as optional, and use text probably as most of them so you get comfortable. And like I said, we kind of push the limits on, and you get used to what you can do, what you can't, what fields work. Again, this is all still beta, so this feature is still in the oven, still proofing. Okay, so now that we've done all this, let's go look at that admin interface that objects beautifully creates for us, right? So again, the power of objects, we need to do a session, I think we've got one planned, or Andrew's planning it, on objects. But the benefit of using objects is that it integrates with all of the core framework of Liferay. So asset render, collections provider, search, workflow, all of that is provided for me out of the box, which is why in the next step, spoiler, I'm going to use the collection provider that is being provided for me to now then present that data on a page. But right now, let's go look at applications and let's look at EDU podcasts. Oh, look at that. What? I've got all of my records. I've got the data that's being pulled in from iTunes calling the Ballerina, via the Ballerina service, and now I have it available within Liferay, as if the data was within was actually living within Liferay. Now, I still would have to implement like the post method for adding, because all we're basically doing is getting all the records, a list of them, and then we're going to get also just one if we did for the search, but I'd also would have to implement like a method for the delete. None of those are going to work right now. Yeah, the view should work just fine. Yes, because that's going to call that single record. In fact, if I look over here at the ballerina service, well, it's not. I probably may not have the logging up on that one, but as I say, you can see the logging. You can see the log request. In fact, that's what I would probably say is one thing you could do is kind of whatever you write your backend in, you could kind of just log all the requests out to kind of discover what requests are being made that you need to implement. So wait, it gets better from here. So now let's go make everything pretty, because this is just using the generic. Let's go to our main site. Let's go over here to not design. I want to go to pages, and let's create a new collection page. Choose the provider. There's my EDU podcasts that I want. I've got, I don't have any master pages created yet. And then we're going to call this page, we're just going to call this EDU podcasts. And now I've got a collection. I've got a page with the collection. Collection display fragment is already mapped to my EDU podcasts. I want it as a grid, but I am going to change this to be, let's say, 4 columns, for example. And we need to do something first, because I need a custom fragment. So I'm going to hit, I'm going to leave this right here. And let's go back over here to design. This is what I get for kind of going all scripted in this. I totally forgot I need to go create a custom fragment, because the image fragment out of the box doesn't do everything I want to do. So I'm going to do create a new set. I'm going to call it extras. I'm not really creative in my names. And then we're going to base it off of the out of the box image. So I'm going to take this image and I'm going to copy it to my new fragment set called extras, make it save. And I'm going to edit this, and then I'm going to make a couple of changes. So copy some JavaScript. You'll see why I'm doing this in a minute if you've ever worked with the image. I think product is actually open on this, or there might be another way to do this, but this is my file for it. So we can publish, and then I'm going to come over here. I'm going to hit refresh, and then I'm going to take and apply the extras. I'm going to put this image in here. And then I'm going to take a heading, and I'm going to drop the heading in here at the top. So I think I'm going to put it at the bottom. It probably doesn't matter. Let's go ahead and map this. So I'm going to say map it to the artist name. There we go. And then for the image, I'm going to map that to the artwork URL. Look at that. You can see that I had to have a text field, but then I'm using JavaScript to insert the attribute. So I can get the image out of the box between objects to map that from a field. It wants to only allow me to have a text, and I just had to do this right now. Let's see, I could change the format of this. Maybe we do fine. Yeah, but do 3. Yeah, I'll go back to 4. I can change the formatting, but that's not what the point is about this. All right, I'm going to go and just publish. And then let's go view this. Look at that. So I've used out-of-the-box features to handle all of the UI, and this data is over in Liferay. And if you were watching my screen, you can see the calls that were being made over here to the ballerina service. So, like I said, you'd have to go, for additional tasks, you'd have to go, create the methods for the proxy deletion. creating the records, but you get the idea that what it's doing is allowing you to take the object framework and everything that objects provides you, and then like it just proxy those requests off to this microservice that then handles all of the sourcing of the data for you. So it makes it really nice compared to what you'd have to do this currently without this feature. So like I said, it's a new feature. I encourage you to look at it and try it out. And then, it is unsupported. Beta features are unsupported, so you wouldn't get support to do this in production. But however, what you get, the benefit of trying this out and testing it, and then giving, reach out to me or Andrew, give us feedback, is that then you get to be in on the front lines of a new feature that has a lot of promise to be able to help you in your organization and with the solutions you need. So that's kind of the, it's kind of a give and take. We're trying to let you in on what product is doing because it's ultimately to help you, but we've got to have your feedback on it. So with that said, I'm really done. Are there any questions? I will just raise your hand or put it in the chat or the Q&A. In fact, I do see some Q&A questions. Let me go ahead and go through those. Actually, there's really only one. The other ones are you guys. Thank you for replying, but you can see my screen. Christoph says, sorry if I missed something, but why wasn't the iTunes Apple API addressed directly? So far, I don't see any advantage to the normal Liferay object if it is necessary to write a service, in this case, Ballerina, that returns the correct JSON structure. Because if I already write much of a service that returns the right structure, then it is not much more effort for me to call the object API itself to create updates into API objects. Because if I see this correctly, the only time I save the proxy is to the CRUD calls. The added value I would have expected under proxy objects would be a mapping possibility of the external data structure with the desired structure in Liferay, including specification of the local degree. Okay, that's a long question, Christoph. So the main, but let me see if I can at least address maybe the first part. Is that the reason why we wrote the Ballerina service is because instead of calling the iTunes API directly, is because the iTunes directly, their API is not supporting the contract that Liferay is expecting for the proxy objects. So we've got to have some mediator in the middle that knows how to communicate with Liferay, or that's going to communicate with Liferay in fetching that data from whatever the source may be. If your REST, if the endpoint that you have, you could probably make an alternation, to that REST endpoint where it would communicate with what Liferay is expecting. Then sure, you don't have to if you've got an existing one. But that is in short why. Now I will say, as far as the mapping goes, like where I had to map these fields at, and some of the demos I've already done with customers, that was something that came up, was it would be really nice if somehow that this field mapping could be decreed or discovered automatically, so that when at the time that the client extension is registered, that it doesn't it doesn't have to then you don't have to model it here. It could actually maybe dynamically discover fields that were like if the backend service makes a new field available, that then it would automatically be available here. And so then the front end, like content admins, could then, they'd have a new field that they can map something to, within, a fragment. But yeah, that unfortunately you do have to kind of map that right now. But yeah. So Bryce asks, what is the issue with the out-of-the-box image fragment? Is it when you need to use a map to your role? Yes. So if I use the out-of-the-box one, Bryce, I couldn't. It might be a different way now, but when I was trying to do this earlier, like I could not find a way with the. Let me edit this one, and I'll place the other image on the screen, the out-of-the-box one. if I place this in here, and I go to it to try to map it and do mapping, it's only allowing me to do the user profile picture. And so I couldn't get the field that I needed from objects because it doesn't map to whatever the, the type, the field types don't map up. So my hack was basically add a text field that is only showing up when you're editing, when the content page is in edit mode, that allows me to map that URL for the anchor for the image in here, and that way then it really, the JavaScript just sets it for the image. That was why. Okay, oh, more questions. Let me scroll down. Okay, is this feature behind a feature flag, or is it enabled with the latest DXP release? So you have to at least have 92, I believe. You'd have to check, but let me go back out. What you can do, at least have 92, which, gosh, I think if I'm remembering correctly, the Q3 release was based off of 92, or it was based upon 93. I don't remember right now. But I have heard also, like next week, I think is when Q4 gets released. So, just in sense, you can use the update, like try update 93. That's what I'm using right here, or like, or a newer one. But, as far as like when the quarter releases are coming out, the next one actually should be next week. Is this okay? So Rodney says, would it be easier to directly call third-party JSON services and display collections instead of proxy objects? Well, you could call the JSON service, yeah, if you've got it available, but you still would want to use proxy objects, because what the benefit is that the proxy, the objects itself, the benefit of this is that everything it integrates with the core framework. I get that for free. So when I model this entity here, I get, like I said, like I mentioned, I can make use of this in the workflow. I get the collection provider, just any of the core framework is available for me to reference. Like you saw, like even on the fragment page or on the content page, that collection was already provided. If I'm writing this myself, then I've got to go add all those other classes to implement those frameworks. Does the headless API that is generated also work with proxy objects? Oh, that's a really good question. Yes. So actually, if I do /OAPI, I've got EDU podcasts. Let me go back. So anything custom within the like objects generated or modeled is in the C namespace, and also there's a GraphQL interface too, which again is why the objects framework is so powerful, because I didn't have to go use REST Builder to get this capability. It's already provided for me. So now if I go here, I've not tried this out, I think. Maybe I have. Oh, there, yes. So even so see, I can interface with that too. Or actually, where this is really nice is I've got a React application that is remote, that is making use of data within Liferay. But again, the whole idea with these front-end client extensions, or the client extensions in general, and the remote client extensions, where I can have an Angular app or React application in my landscape, is that a whole nother group of developers that maybe aren't really have a deep Liferay knowledge, they can now be enabled, because any developer can read a headless API. So all those developers do that are creating that React application for your organization, they just look at the headless APIs that are available, and they're just going to call the ones that they need. And they don't have to know where the actual data is coming from. And then, so it's really nice for them they can just one place, they're going to be able to access that data. Let's see. Tangentially related, given the internal feature flag configuration management in Liferay, do you see a case where customers reuse the same feature flag configuration management for their own custom features? That's a really good question. On the Liferay platform, can a customer extend this? Yes, you can. Andrew asked this. We asked this to product. So there is basically like a feature flag framework that you can implement, but there's like zero documentation on this. So what you're going to have to do is dive into the bowels of Liferay, into the source code, and find, I would probably look for like maybe search in the Liferay source where some of those like LPS codes are, and just kind of go down from there. I've never looked at it myself, but yeah, this was an idea that we did run across with project, and I don't even think they had thought about this, about if customers even used this possibility, themselves. So I don't know. I think the idea is like maybe we might be able to get some documentation on it later, but yeah, it is something you could make use of. Yeah. It's a really nice idea, the way you could test something locally in your own solutions. You skimmed over the OAuth pieces. If you were trying to hit an external service, is configuration of OAuth settings available? Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, I wasn't really trying to skim. I did. This is so much. Let me go to that. Actually, I think it's on the other OAuth screen. We're looking at possibly doing a follow-up on this, but here's where that was registered, and then the service. But again, you can tweak even the scopes from here, from what was originally, enabled. So you could, change that. The authorizations are listed right here. So I didn't it's not really secure right now, to some degree. It's just basically meeting the minimal. And some of this is honestly just because I don't have the documentation even kind of like internally really to kind of like reference myself. So this is really kind of exploratory. A colleague of mine in France, he dove into this, was the first, and then was sharing it with a bunch of us. So, but we are trying to look at maybe a follow-up session where we go deeper into like looking at how the OAuth is, and maybe even doing one of the other microservice features where, like, say, we're triggering a workflow action, and we look at just a more complicated kind of use case kind of thing. Not a question, but since you wanted feedback, I can already see a few use cases. That's great for using for existing customers. I really like it being a separate microservice with caching instead of building modules and not having to convert it myself to an asset with loads of boilerplate enabled to play. That's excellent. Again, y'all, thank you very much. I've got time, so I want to honor your time. But yeah, if you guys would like to, if anyone wants to just talk, raise your hand. I'll click on you to allow you to talk. Or you can add more questions. Oh, hang on, I think I got one more. It says, do we need a proxy service for Salesforce data? Yeah, so I think actually if I do that, you don't have to write the proxy service. I have not done this yet, but that is actually one that they somehow provide out of the box. I bet it should be within instance settings. Let me see. I can find. I did stumble across it in here. You know what? Let me just do. Let me see what this returns me. Oh, there we go. Third-party integration. Yeah, I think you'll just. I've not done this yet, and I think there actually is a little bit of documentation on this, maybe, because actually this is the original like concept or idea for this proxy objects, was to be able to get data in and out of Salesforce and to have a more robust integration. And then the whole like abstracting this feature to where you can use it in any to aggregate data from any external system, kind of came about with that. So I believe that once you would configure this, then you'd probably have to go back and model whatever your entities were in objects, the same way I was doing a minute ago with the ballerina, and that would be all you would need to do. I'm not really clear. We'll try to see about doing a follow-up on that. Yeah, that's a really good question. Right. Like I said, anybody else, if you want to ask a question, I'll click on the allow to talk. Just raise your hand, or if you want to put it in the chat. Well, let's see anybody. Okay. Well, like I said, I want to honor your time. So I will send out a after session email, and we'll have the survey in there. And I would really say, fill out the survey if you would, please. Again, give us your feedback. Andrew and I, we try to do these in our spare time. And it helps us validate with our supervisors, how valuable these are to you. There are a lot of new features. There's like API builder. That's another new one that is really nice. There's just several new features that are coming out that product's working on. We're going to try to look at doing sessions on those. But yeah, give us your feedback. And like I said, if you're interested in this, please try it and then reach out to me or Andrew just directly if you need to, to find out. Because the product manager really wants to hear the feedback on this. So it's the case, like I said, you could get in on the, ground zero of trying to shape this and make it really a viable feature that your organization could benefit from. Well, with that said, guys, thank you very much. I really appreciated this, and I hope this was helpful to you. I hope it gets you excited. And yeah, look forward to, I think probably the sessions might be sometime in the new year, maybe. You guys have a great holidays. Thank you.